Okay, so we're a few minutes after 7, so I think we'll get started. If that's okay with everyone and our speakers. I'll just end the poll here. And I'll stop screen sharing for the moment. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We have a very exciting evening ahead. Just to introduce myself first, my name is Eleanor Turner and I am the newly appointed Biosphere Officer working with South Kerry Development Partnership on the UNESCO Kerry Biosphere Reserve. And I'll be the host for this evening. I'd like to welcome you all. This is our first event in a whole series that we have planned called the Our Planet, Your Biosphere Autumn Event Series. And this has been supported by Creative Ireland, the Environmental Protection Agency and Kerry County Council. The events are set to run throughout November, so keep an eye out for more over the coming week. All of the events are going to be online, so although the focus is on the Kerry UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, we'd love to have you join us wherever you are in the world, which has been made possible by using mediums like this. And I'll be sharing more details about the other events later in the evening. We have 5 speakers lined up for this evening, so I hope you all find it enjoyable. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end, so we'll hear from all of our speakers first, and then we'll address the questions to the panel at the end. So if you have any questions, you should be able to see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can drop your questions in there as we go, and we'll try and get to as many as we can after the speakers have finished. So later this evening, we'll hear from Niall Donnchú, who is Assistant Secretary in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, about the origins of the Kerry Biosphere Reserve and what it means to have a UNESCO Kerry Biosphere Reserve here in Kerry. We'll hear from Murrell, who is Chief Executive of Kerry County Council, and she'll join us to talk about how local authorities are working to support communities to protect and enhance biodiversity, and in particular how Kerry County Council has a long-standing role in this. And she'll be followed by Noel, who is CEO of South Kerry Development Partnership, and he'll be discussing the links between South Kerry Development Partnership and the work being carried out locally to support the Kerry UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And last but not least, we'll have our project manager from the MacGillycuddy Reeks European Innovative Partnership, Patricia Deane, and Tricia will give us an overview of how this innovative project is supporting upland farmers in protecting, managing, and restoring upland habitats. But first of all, it is my great honor to introduce our first speaker, who is Minister of State with the Department of Agriculture, Minister Hackett. Thank you so much for joining us. Minister Hackett is Minister of State with a special responsibility for land use and biodiversity. So thank you again for joining us, Minister. So I have a few questions, just a few questions to get started, and thank you for helping us launch the whole event series. It's lovely to have you join us. So just for anyone interested who's listening in, who may think about working in the area of politics and the environment in the future, could you give us a little insight into what a day in the life of Minister for State for Land Use and Biodiversity looks like, and what kind of issues or projects are on your radar at the moment?
Thanks, Eleanor. Look, and it's a real honour to be here. And look, I wish you all the best with the series, and hope it goes really well. And I hope everyone has a great evening also. Look, I suppose I look upon my job to essentially deliver on the programme for government commitments within my own particular remit, you know, so as they relate to land use and biodiversity. Obviously, I'm in the Department of Agriculture. And I suppose as a green politician, I'm actually very enthusiastic and sort of excited about what that could look like. I suppose on a day-to-day basis, I mean, the whole ministerial portfolio is far busier than I anticipated in one sense. You know, it's full of meetings, it's full of briefings, planning, diary appointments, and I suppose that each day, look, while there are things planned, it always will throw something else up. So it's busy, but it's really quite enthusiastic. I'm enthusiastic about it in the sense that I have a good feel for the brief. I am a farmer myself, so I can, you know, I would like to hopefully look at myself as someone who can bridge, if you like, that gap, I think, between environmentalism and, you know, doing our bit for biodiversity and sort of farming communities. Because I think, I mean, I think there is some work to be done there, and I think actually projects like, you know, even the EIP projects and that are really good at maybe connecting that divide in a very positive way. But look, I enjoy my engagements. I'll have meetings regularly with either farmer representative groups, a lot of those, to be honest. I need to have more, I think, with more environmental groups. I mean, I do, but I think it needs to be more targeted. So I'm looking forward to more of that. And I think anyone who's interested in maybe getting into politics, or, I mean, I didn't get into it in a very structured way, it just sort of happened. And I suppose it is about getting involved in your local area. And if you're particularly enthused by something local, if it is biodiversity, you know, get involved and see what the issues are and see what can be solved. And then what I realized was there was very little you could do on your own, and you needed, you know, if you want to bring about sort of significant change, you need that political weight in a way behind you. And I think that's probably what drove me into it in the end. But I suppose I have a lot of elements to my portfolio. I'm at the moment, I think it's forestry at the minute. I mean, people will probably be aware there's been there's a huge backlog in forestry, and there's all sorts of issues, and there's concerns with it from an environmental perspective. But then there's also the sawmill, the nurseries, the sort of industry side of it too to deal with. So I suppose that's still very much on my radar to get sorted out, but I'm looking forward to developing a new forestry model very soon, engaging with people, engaging with communities on that, because there's a lot we have to learn from mistakes made in the past, and I think we certainly need to move on. But look, I'm enthusiastic about lots of elements in it, and look, I'm looking forward to, you know, expanding the organic farming scheme as well, for example, very soon.
Sounds like there's always a lot on your plate, it sounds like. So just listening to you there, you sound very passionate about the subject matter that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, even though it's full of meetings and very busy. And what was it that sparked your love of the outdoors and biodiversity, and how did you get so connected to it that was your passion to pursue as your career?
I think it was probably growing up in the countryside. I'm from County Mayo originally, and I lived about 3 miles from the closest nearest village, little village called Ballandine, and just myself, my brother, my parents. And look, we weren't farmers or anything, but we lived bang right in the middle of farms, and you know, in very remote in a sense. And you know, I just recall when we were kids going for walks across the fields at the back of our house and just seeing stuff that we just assumed were always there. We'd catch an odd newt, and we'd see stickleback in the drains, and we'd see big maybe they weren't this big, but they were quite big, dragonflies, you know, just really colorful things. And you just assume those things are the norm, you know. But then even within 20 years, you know, when I was late into my 20s and would revisit home, those things just weren't there anymore. And I suppose, you know, even in a short time, you could see, I think people can tangibly relate to biodiversity loss in particular, maybe more so than climate change, which is the other great threat, I suppose. And I just think that, you know, getting outdoors and appreciating that, and I think that happened with the COVID thing. There's a lot, you know, people seem to think that, you know, especially in the early days, because the weather was nice, that people maybe grew a bit more aware of their own locale, even urban based, you know, and what they could see. And I suppose just I like, you know, I like to wind down like that at the weekends, and that go out on my farm and see the animals and see stuff changing. And because I stay a couple of days a week in Dublin, I do relish getting back home again, and I run a bit to clear the head. And you know, laps of St. Stephen's Green just aren't the same as running on the rural roads, potholes and all, you know. So yeah,
that's lovely to hear. I often hear that from people in positions who are working professionally within the area of ecology or environmental. It's always a childhood experience, I think, that sparks our first love of it. So it's really easy to connect, I think, when you're younger. I suppose you have that sense of exploration. As well as being a minister, I know you're also a member of the Seanad, and I understand that there was a biodiversity motion passed by the Seanad recently. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, in fact, it was just today, and it was just literally an hour or so ago. It's not quite passed yet, but it should be. And essentially, it was my Green Party senator colleagues, Pauline O'Reilly, Roisin Garvey, and Vincent P. Martin, passed or moved the motion, which is really, it was really I suppose a reiteration of the commitments made in the Dáil last year on you know, really declaring and endorsing the Dáil's declaration of a climate and biodiversity emergency, and I suppose it was to reinforce the commitments made in the programme for government in relation to biodiversity. I think biodiversity seems to sort of get second fiddle, or it appears that a lot of the time to climate action, and we have obviously the climate action bill is in the process of going through pre-legislative scrutiny, and I think we felt, or my colleagues felt, that it was the time to push biodiversity back up to the top of the agenda again. I think that's what's the important thing. We have to keep it there. We have to keep banging on about it if we really want to affect those changes. So hopefully that has helped achieve that somewhat today. So yeah.
Great to hear that it's moving through. And so just in terms of biodiversity conservation, what actions are the Department of Agriculture taking to support this? Is there anything else in the works as well that's going to back up what's happening?
Well, I suppose when you look at it, I mean, farmers probably, agriculture and farmers are not the only custodians of the land, but it's quite a significant, management of land. And I suppose, I mean, my Department of Agriculture, do it in different ways, looking a large part through the European Innovation Partnership projects, where farmers involved at the grassroots level in designing and implementing a project, and they have to engage with scientists and ecologists and communities and all that. And I think that's really good. And I mean, there's 23 of those. And it's great to have Patricia Deane on here too, who's from the MacGillycuddy Reeks EIP. So I think they've been really, really successful. And they're not running that long. So I think there's a huge lot of scope there to build on those, and to get that sort of enthusiasm at the level of farmers in a particular area, because I mean, we have quite a diverse type of landscape in Ireland, and even soil types vary quite dramatically, and there's landscapes need to be managed in different ways. I mean, the department also rolls out all the common agricultural policy, rural development programs and so forth, but they're more in one sense, look, something like the GLOS scheme, which is really, intentioned to support biodiversity on farms and low carbon way, but every farmer gets the same choice of actions, if you like, and picks and chooses, whereas I think the EIPs are really targeted for a particular region and for a particular reason, and I think that's really, really strong. Looking even in Kerry, like we've Kerry farmers on the Pearl Mussel project, they're even next door in the River Bride project, the Bride project with Cork, dairy farmers. So I think the variety of farmers on that and the variety of farming types that are involved, I think really look at something I really would love to build on and use that as a model going forwards. And I think you get that enthusiasm then from the farmers too. They sort of have a real sense of ownership and they want it to work too. So fingers crossed we'll have more of those in the future.
It's great to see the sort of the community-led approach where it's coming from the ground up, like you mentioned. It's really interesting to see how that's developing, which is a really positive way that this work is being done on the ground, I suppose. And do you think that there should be more, or that there's space for more collaboration between government departments tackling biodiversity and issues of biodiversity?
I think absolutely, and in a way it was a surprise to many to see even a junior ministerial role in the agriculture with the word biodiversity in it, but I think with having a Green Party person in that role is great. And I will work closely with my Green Party colleague Malcolm Noonan is in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and his brief is the heritage brief, and that's really, you've a huge overlap there in terms of what myself and Malcolm can get up to in terms of directing, the National Parks and Wildlife Services and on-farm projects. And, biodiversity in essence really is our natural heritage, and I think that connection is really strong. And there's also a good connection then with Minister Eamon Ryan's department, in the fact that that particular department, and he does have environment in his title, is responsible for the implementation of the EU directive, the EU strategy on biodiversity. And also you've got the EPA and that agency within his remit as well. So I think the overlaps are great. And I would like to think now with green politicians in those particular portfolios that we should be able to work really effectively. So hopefully we'll see far more collaboration and really positive developments going forwards.
Fantastic, thank you. And so just the last question we have for you then, we keep putting you on the spot.
Right.
Are you optimistic that the challenges of food production can be balanced with protecting our environment?
I think we have to be. I think, look, if we don't get it right, we will neither have an environment in which to grow food and no food to eat, really, you know. So I think, look, we have to be optimistic. I think the more projects we see on the ground, even the EIP projects, in terms of, you know, while farmers are still, you know, availing of animals to manage land, and I think that importance of that has come out. I mean, they are producing food, but they're also land managers in a very constructive way. I think what is missing in that is I suppose the appreciation from the market side of that, from the consumers on the ground, you know. And look, if it were me and you're faced with buying a product that's come from lands that are managed for biodiversity, I mean, for me, it's like a no-brainer that people should want. There are people out there in this huge world of ours, and even in our own country, who will pay a premium for that. But I think we need to get that piece right, from a departmental and from a food marketing point of view. I think that would be the ultimate goal, that, you know, farmers actually get a recognised price for what they produce. But I think, you know, the way the EU Green Deal has gone, I think that's very positive development. I think I know the CAP negotiations are sort of, you know, getting towards the end, and look, there has been some disappointment expressed and maybe some dilution potentially of some of the environmental measures within that. Look, we are one relatively small voice at the European table, unfortunately. But whatever we're dealt with and whatever we're told to utilise within that, I think we have to work really hard to make it work. But we have to be optimistic, and I think if we do get it right, we're going to have a really vibrant rural. It's a lot of rural communities that will need to be built around this, and I think we should be able to do it, and we just learn from the projects that work, and yeah, look forward to it. But yeah, be enthusiastic. You have to be.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? The enthusiasm has to come from somewhere that helps to drive across things at a higher stage, I think.
I think so. And I think as well, there's so many enthusiastic farmers out there as well, who are, a lot of them are doing things just because they see a better way of farming, and some are doing it unsupported entirely, you know, and that enthusiasm is hugely important. I think getting that peer-to-peer enthusiasm spreading at the farmer level would be really important too.
Brilliant, yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that sort of community level and the farmer level from Patricia, Deane later in the evening. So that's my last question for you, Minister, and thank you so much for joining us. I understand that you have another meeting that you have to go to, so we might not catch you later for the Q&A, but we really appreciate you popping on and helping us launch the event series for November.
Not at all. And listen, all the very best. And listen, if there are any questions, I mean, seriously, you can send them on to me in an email, and if you want me, I can respond. I'm happy enough to do that. But listen, have a great evening, and thank you very much, and best wishes to the rest of the evening. Take care.
Thank you so much. So we'll bring on Niall Donnchú, who is our next speaker. And thank you, Minister Hackett, for your time. I'm going to start sharing my screen now, because I have the slides here for Niall, getting it moving. Sorry for the delay. So Niall Donnchú is Assistant Secretary in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and he's going to give us a bit of a background to the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve programme. Welcome, Niall, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. I'm delighted actually to see the presentation come up on screen. It was being rejected by various servers all day. So, and
got there in the end.
I got there in the end, yeah. And thank you very much for hosting this evening, and congratulations to begin with on your recent appointment as the Biosphere Officer for the Kerry Biosphere Reserve. So I'm delighted to be here this evening, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service, with whom I have the privilege of working, it will be delighted to work with you on managing and promoting the biosphere in accordance with best international practice. So in Kerry, and I can say we because I am from Kerry, I think if you asked me about my heritage background, I would have told you that I was born on a bog and raised in a national park. When that's in your lineage, it's kind of embedded in your DNA. But in any event, in Kerry, we're fortunate not only to be close to nature, but I think to be part of it. And to misquote John B. Keane, I think in belonging to Kerry, you belong to the elements. I think in belonging to Kerry, you belong to what is elemental as well. And I mean, it was a particular privilege for me to be involved a number of years ago in being given responsibility for the heritage area and the National Parks and Wildlife Service. And in that respect, to be part of the effort to grow the Kerry Biosphere Reserve. So it's I'm very honoured to be here this evening on video talking to you. So if we can move to slide 2, Eleanor, it says I'm to ask you, so I will ask you. So in the presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of what a biosphere actually is. I won't dwell too long on it because I think anybody joining us here this evening pretty much knows what it is. I'll provide some background information on the Kerry Biosphere in terms of the area that it now covers and the biodiversity features it contains. And I'll focus then on our role in NPWS and in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage in managing the core area and the vision that we have for the future of this biosphere. And then I'll conclude by showing how communities, and this is about communities, without communities, these don't work. Without communities, heritage doesn't work, but biospheres certainly don't work. But in conclusion, and when I'll be showing you how communities can engage with the biosphere and both protect it and benefit from that engagement. Slide 3, please, Eleanor. So in essence, put it simply, a biosphere is a place where nature and human activities connect. And biospheres include ecosystems, areas around them, and above all, the communities that live and work within those areas. They're internationally recognized for their natural resources and biodiversity, yet they're also actively managed to promote that balance in the relationship between people and nature. And you will find that kind of a running theme in my approach to this presentation this evening. So you have conservation on the one hand, it's a sustainable economic existence and development and human activity on the other. And another important goal of biospheres is the promotion of research and learning. So how are biospheres managed? The next slide, please, Eleanor. Biospheres they're sometimes referred to as biosphere reserves, were established under UNESCO's Man and the Biosphere program, launched in 1971. And the World Network of Biospheres is governed by a statutory framework adopted by the UNESCO General Conference in 1995, which includes the definitions, the objectives, the criteria, the designation procedure for biosphere reserves. So places are awarded biosphere reserve status by UNESCO, but they're managed then locally in partnership with communities, NGOs, local and national governments, and so forth. And this department, my department rather, through the National Parks and Wildlife Service, is the national authority for biospheres under UNESCO. So the next slide, the biospheres in Ireland, and I hope I'm not going too quickly through these. Ireland has two designated biosphere reserves. They're Dublin Bay and the Kerry Biosphere, and both were originally designated in the early 1980s. I think Kerry was 1982. In slide 5, you'll see that in 2015, the old Bull Island Biosphere was extended and renamed Dublin Bay Biosphere to meet the revised UNESCO criteria for designation. So to give a bit of background on the Kerry Reserve, slide 6, please, Eleanor. The Kerry Reserve was designated originally in 1982, and it was in essence the national park. UNESCO's vision of biospheres has since evolved, and as a result, it updated the criteria for reserves, and in the main, due to its size, Killarney National Park no longer fitted those criteria. So in order to retain the designation, the Biosphere Reserve in Killarney had to be expanded. And this meant that the land in the broader countryside outside of the national park, where Kerry County Council is the lead authority, was included in the new designation. So following a review process, an engagement process with stakeholders and the local communities, the new Kerry Biosphere Reserve was designated in May 2017 by UNESCO. UNESCO did request further action on a number of issues to make sure that the Kerry Reserve is fully compliant with its requirement, and the work aimed to addressing those issues is ongoing. And indeed, that is something for which we are sometimes criticised. These are organic systems, and work needs to be. We need to continuously invest in the natural heritage, in the communities, and in the way in which they are managed to retain that UNESCO designation. So the next slide, please. So this will show you what the core area encompasses, and then what the peripheral areas also encompass. So the core area is the full extent of Killarney National Park and the two congruent associated reserves. And those areas are entirely in state ownership and are managed for long-term nature conservation by the NPWS. Then there's a buffer zone where only activities compatible with the management objectives can take place, and they include areas adjacent to the core area within the Lough Lane catchment and the MacGillycuddy Reeks mountain range, which Patricia will talk in detail about later on. And an outer transition area where sustainable resource management practices are promoted and developed incorporates other areas of the Lough Lane catchment and the MacGillycuddy Reeks mountain range. So the extension of the biosphere encompassed all of that with both buffer and transition areas. And the extended areas are generally not in state ownership, but are hydrologically linked and have habitat connectivity with the core area of the national park. Therefore, sustainable land use, as well as community and scientific understandings of these areas are hugely important in supporting the integrity of the entire biosphere. And there are many legislative and policy instruments in place to safeguard the key ecological interests. And at the same time, Kerry County Council's land use plans seek to ensure sustainable land use and development in these areas, and there'll be more about that later on. And in addition, continued stakeholder collaboration, talking to people, engaging with people, talking to communities, engaging with communities is essential to ensure that the region is managed effectively, but also to meet the requirements of local communities and the heritage, natural heritage in wider interest groups. So slide 8, please. So what are the unique features of this biosphere? So among the diverse habitats in the national park, one of which you see behind Eleanor, Ross Castle, she tells me. So there you go. Ross Castle without the castle, but the hinterland. So among the diverse habitats in the park include woodlands, mountains, bogs, lakes, rivers, and a rich variety of species, all of which are special. I think we had a discussion with colleagues today about, was it all? It is all, because it's all a mosaic. And the interdependencies are absolutely crucial in any ecosystem. And if you take one away, you unbalance the entire thing. So the red deer population living in the park is the only indigenous wild herd in the country. Most of Ireland's other native mammal species are also found here, including several species of bat, and over 140 bird species have been recorded, and many of whom are rare and protected, and unfortunately red listed, but rare and protected. We have rare invertebrates as well. We have the Kerry slug, freshwater pearl mussel that the Minister referred to earlier on, and perhaps one of the rarest Irish dragonfly, the northern emerald, and that's an endangered species, as many of you will know. It breeds in shallow pools in bogs in the national park, and currently under threat, like much else, from habitat changes and indeed from climate change. Plants such as the Killarney lily, the Killarney fern, and the slender naiad, and several other are also to be found in the reserve and in the national park, and they're all legally protected. And And on top of that, of course, the recent, well, not so recent, but recent publication of the discovery of a new native vascular plant, which is, I suppose, a rare occasion for a comparatively well-known European species. But the presence in Killarney is of considerable biogeographic interest and conservation significance. How did it get there? And we've included that picture on the slide there. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce its Latin name. I'm afraid I missed the Latin education, but I mean, we are hugely excited by this find, and such delicacy within the park, you know, is an eloquent demonstration, I suppose, of the delicacy of all the interlocking species and habitats within the area. But we're hugely proud of the discovery of that and our part in it. Core area management is the next slide, slide 9, conscious of time, Eleanor. The Kerry Biosphere, again, as I said earlier, is managed by Kerry County Council and the NPWS, and we formed a Biosphere Management Council, and Moira Murrell, who's coming up next, will remember the many meetings about how we do this, how we achieve this, how we retain the designation, and how we improve on it. And I have to say, you know, I work with a lot of local authorities, and I'm not saying it because it's native to me. But Kerry County Council is certainly one of the most progressive local authorities and values hugely what it has. And, you know, sometimes we're criticized, perhaps the valuation is around the tourism value. It's not just about the tourism, because without the ecosystems, without the protections, without the designations, you undermine everything else. But Kerry, I have to say, has been visionary, insightful, progressive, and a wonderful partner in regard to the national park and indeed the broader reserve. Around the conservation and management of the biodiversity, the national park is managed primarily for conservation of biodiversity, has a significant workforce for that, and is, you know, allocated substantial enough funding. It's never enough. I'll be perfectly frank about it. The latter is often for new projects from year to year. And for instance, in 2020 alone, we spent about $500,000 on invasive species clearance, the perennial battle against rhododendron and so forth. A tough battle, and one that we you know, we've hit a point of inflection, absolutely. And just to commend Minister Hackett and indeed Minister Noonan, who are on this, they brought a new energy and a new enthusiasm and a new thinking to government, and a refreshing of the attitude to biodiversity and to nature. So we've hit a really important point of inflection in terms of the amount of investment we can now bring to all of the national parks and all of these designations. So NPWS's budget for next year is up 128% on this year's, and that is simply phenomenal. I mean, we've been trying to manage 6 national parks, 78 reserves, and 2 biosphere designations on less than €1 million a month, which is not possible. So this is hugely important for us. Research and biodiversity, again, I'm on the same slide, yes I am. And I referenced this at the outset. It's the learnings, it's building up that intellectual capital, building up that know-how. It's hugely important, and sharing that know-how, a kind of an open commons attitude to the sharing of that information. So in order to further the commitment to advance the core area is a biodiversity reference site. We've undertaken and commissioned a huge amount of research in respect of the biodiversity in the park, the arachnids, the bryophytes, the fungi, the slender gnide, the river invertebrates in the national park, just to name a few, deer surveys. Sadly, the study of the impact of fires in Killarney National Park. We've done a major biodiversity review. We've done the Deane Island Piers Towpath Ecological Report, and we've done an aquatic survey of Killarney National Park, and all of that information all feeds into the better management of it. And inevitably, in terms of the national park, the management of that exchange with human footfall, with tourism, and all of that. Supporting tourism, recreational and educational initiatives is hugely important, and the visitor experience is being enhanced through a number of projects. For example, the construction to get people off, I suppose, with different points of interest. To, you know, we have areas that are heavily travelled, heavily visited, and one of the challenges for us, particularly as people become more interested in nature, and this year was a bumper year for us in terms of visits to national parks. Believe it or not, we would host in the region of 4 million visitors to national parks and nature reserves, and this year, because of all the staycations, we did that again. But one of the challenges is to strike that right balance between the visitor experience and our overriding objective in terms of managing the habitat, managing it for conservation, and managing it for posterity. So we've a huge number of projects going on in that regard, and the focus being on spreading the impact and lessening it on the more sensitive areas. And that's not to hide those areas from the public. Some of them are simply inaccessible anyway. But in terms of managing the visitor experience and all of that, we made a significant investment in staff. Again, we never have enough. We could, you know, we manage our national parks and nature reserves with, I think, 70 rangers. Not enough, absolutely. And the minister and government have now committed to a new recruitment campaign, which we'll be announcing very shortly, to get more people out on the ground with nature conservation experience. And it truly, with the core of professional, technical and ranger and indeed administrative staff we have, a calling to the national parks is a true calling. I'm very proud of my association with it, but it's an enriching experience to get out on the ground and to encounter the kind of expertise and the kind of effort and devotion that we see across our national park system, and especially in Killarney, including people who've retired coming back in as part of Mehels and all of that, and helping to maintain the rarity that is Killarney National Park, and indeed the wider biosphere and the Reeks. So a vision for the future, and I'm getting there, Eleanor, is slide 10, please. The major intent of the biosphere is to build on and strengthen conservation of biodiversity in line with the UN conservation goals. And I always say to people, you know, we're very happy to take the constructive criticism. Rome wasn't built in a day. There are certainly areas here that need investment. There are things that we can absolutely improve on. We need to get more colleagues, more conservation experts out on the ground and all of that. And perhaps we need to manage the visitor experience in different ways. We can't lose the communities. Without communities, we have something that's quite sterile. You know, communities are hugely important, and we need to bring communities along with us. Another, you know, so much energy would go in losing you know, and being in that constant battle with communities. And, you know, it's never daunting to look for the right balance. It's something we need to look for all the time. And I think we strike that balance by and large in the communities around the Kerry Biosphere, and certainly with Kerry County Council, and that connectivity through the council back to community, and that local connectivity through NPWS with a very significant presence. And indeed, when they listen to me, I think people think NPWS is headquartered out of Killarney. It is. So we are absolutely delighted, Eleanor, that Kerry now has a dedicated biosphere officer of your caliber, and we're very excited with that appointment. We're looking forward to continued collaboration with Kerry County Council and with all of the local stakeholders, and we'll be organising a series of educational and public awareness events. So today's webinar is simply part of that. So how to engage with us, the next slide. The website and promotional material referenced in the presentation that you see, public awareness and education initiatives. There's a series of community education and engagement that we plan for the coming months. And we can manage that despite lockdown, like we're managing this evening. we'll be doing a workshop on invasive species that was to be held in Killarney House. We'll reschedule that. And I think it's hugely important that there's an understanding of what the challenge is here, what the cost is, and how unremitting that battle actually is, because it's not going to be resolved overnight. It will take a huge resource to resolve it, but we are determined to continue to address it. And we are open to, you know, all kinds of advice and all kinds of initiative on how we do it. I mean, I think a lot of effort gets spent on what's the right way to eradicate rhododendron. I think the right way to eradicate it is the one that actually works. And there are different methodologies. And I think if we spend less energy on arguing about what the methodologies are and more of that energy on elimination, we'd probably achieve much more. So the MacGillycuddy Reeks Mountain Access Forum is another important forum, which will be spoken about later on, established in 2014. And again, and I said this, it'll be a running theme, that engagement with local and statutory agencies and authorities, landowners and interest groups is hugely important. And throughout 2018, just to look back, Kerry County Council and ourselves supported South Kerry Development Partnership in successfully applying for that EIP, which the Minister referenced earlier. And they are hugely important. I mean, we've just landed fairly significant money on life as well. And Kerry benefited hugely from the Pearl Mussel Life project. And we had huge learnings from that, which we're taking elsewhere across the NPWS and the designated areas system, and feeding into quite a few EIPs. And, you know, when Minister Hackett spoke about cooperation, I think I spent probably about 4 hours of this week, including 2 in the company of both Minister Hackett and Minister Noonan, working through areas where we can, with the Department of Agriculture, where we can work together and deliver together, where we can add value to initiatives that they're pursuing through EIP and through the rewetting of carbon-rich soils and so forth, where we're working on the restoration of raised bogs and so on and so forth. And I mean, those ministers didn't start that engagement, but they certainly give the political leadership of that kind of engagement a whole new emphasis and a whole new impetus, and that's hugely important. So Eleanor, it goes without saying, we're looking forward to engaging with you and the entire team, and with Moira and the team in Kerry County Council, and with the entirety of the stakeholders, including the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism in Killarney, which has been a very important partner for us over the years and certainly keeps our feet to the fire, including from an ecological management perspective, which we welcome. And finally, slide 12, simply to wish, thank you. That's Lord Brandon's, I think, isn't it? To thank you for organising this evening, to acknowledge the support of our colleagues in Creative Ireland, to thank my team and colleagues locally, Philip Buckley, Pat Dawson, Shamie Hassett, and the entire team in Kerry, to thank my colleagues, Olga, Sarah Evren, I think we're both on this call, and indeed to thank the generations in Killarney and its internet who've given us this wonderful biospheric jewel to work with.
Thank you so much, Niall. That was it's great to have such detail into the background of it and your knowledge of Killarney in the general area and how important it is and how significant it is to have this biosphere reserve. So thank you so much for sharing all that with us. So I am now going to introduce Moira Murrell, who is Chief Executive of Kerry County Council. Thank you for joining us, Moira. I'm actually going to stop screen sharing because you don't have a presentation for us. You're just going to speak to us about how the County Council has been supporting the Kerry Biosphere Reserve programme for quite some time now.
Thank you, Eleanor, and good evening. It's great to see so many people on. It would be lovely if we could all brought you all to the county and the biosphere this evening, but we'll take what we can get at this point. I think Niall, one of the first species you mentioned, there was the Kerry slug, and I think a few of my local authority colleagues on here, I'd say our hearts skipped a beat, because the poor Kerry slug has been much maligned for many years because of he was blamed, or she was blamed, for stopping a very big infrastructural roads project here many years ago. And I think, look, it does, though, by definition, say how far we have moved, because you know, I think we have learned to build and plan better in conjunction with our environment. I mean, when you take a county like Kerry, we have in the order of, you know, almost 40% of our landscape has some form of protection in some shape or form, be it an SAC, SPA, or whatever. So, you know, we have to learn to live with and work with and develop. You know, it doesn't stop our development, and it allows us to work with and plan better, perhaps, with the environment, and the very special environment that we have. From a Kerry County Council perspective, you know, I suppose the value of having a UNESCO biosphere is very important to us. You know, I suppose we're fortunate to have, you know, on the heritage side, to have the UNESCO designation on the Skellig Michael. We're on our, I suppose, on the journey, as we'll say, in relation to a second site in the county in respect of the Valentia. And here today, you know, talking about the badge of honour and what sets you apart with the UNESCO brand and the UNESCO badge, it's hugely significant to a county. And I suppose I just want to say in that, you know, the biosphere, it's an important, as the core area has incorporated the wider area, it certainly will be hugely important that we're working in partnership. And, you know, Niall stressed very strongly the interrelationship that we have with the NPWS, which is such a valued relationship. The relationship with South Kerry Development Partnership. You know, even Eleanor, you know, I think when you see how you came into our lives, you know, you see a part funding between Niall's department, Kerry County Council, facilitated through South Kerry Development Partnership and Noel. So you can see that there is a real partnership working here to progress this and take it a very focused view on it. And also extending this partnership now to the communities, I think is a really, really important next step that we have. And I suppose, Eleanor, your own appointment, you know, that's a very significant thing in its own right. And, you know, looking at the role, and I suppose there are two things really, I suppose, looking at this biosphere, people need to understand. And I was, even from my own perspective, you know, I was delighted, Niall, you've set out very clearly what a biosphere is, what the core of it is. And I think the role for all our agencies, and certainly I would see with our agency, working with yourself, Eleanor, as well, is that people understand more what the biosphere is. And that also importantly, people understand what the biosphere is not. And I think sometimes when people haven't the information, what can fill that void is a fear or a lack of understanding, and the fear that it will encroach on life and future development and future planning. And I think, you know, the important thing is, you know, this is a really important designation. You know, we're already working with it. You know, its impact on our lives is no more or no less than it would be through our normal practices. And I think that's very important. And that's why I was so delighted, even before I came on, to hear that, you know, Patricia mentioned as well, you know, you're out talking to landowners, meeting landowners, and getting the information out there, and I suppose dispelling the lack of information, filling that void. And I think that's really important. Secondly, I suppose from a Kerry County Council perspective, I suppose we're now going into a new cycle of county development plans. We're out there for the county development plan at the moment. We're starting a new tourism strategy. There'll be new biodiversity plans, new local economic and community plans. All of these will be coming on train over the course of 2021 into 2022. And now that we have the extended outside of the core area for the biosphere, it gives us a great opportunity to integrate these into our planning process and into our plans. And that's very important at a number of levels, because it's giving it the designation in our own plans, it's giving it the acknowledgement, it's giving it the prominence. It's also building it into our thinking, so that it's not something that's over here and it's devoid of all the other thinking in the county. So it becomes part of, we talk about our tourism strategy. This is also an opportunity for the county, and I don't think we should ignore that either. When you look at a biosphere, when you look at a designation from UNESCO, it sets it apart. It's saying it's a standard of excellence. In all of our tourism plans and strategies, sustainability has been at the core of it. We see the programme for government, sustainable tourism, green tourism, it's very much part of the planning that we do. It's very much of how we see the future, and, when you see that emphasis on having a tourism that's working with our environment, and particularly in a county like ourselves, where we do have the 40% designation, we have to be careful in how we plan, and we need to complement one another. So again, building it into our plans is hugely important. As we go for funding for projects and develop projects, it's also critical that these are part of our fundamental and stable plans. So I think that's a big statement, and it's a very important statement from Kerry County Council, because we see this biosphere as forming part of our planning, our corporate plans as a county. And I think that's very important for the future in how we approach the biosphere. Niall mentioned the research and study. I think that's a huge one, a huge opportunity for us also, and looking at the opportunity there. I suppose, as a county, we have looked at and working very much with our partners in South Kerry as well. We have a very nice project running in the South Kerry area, the Skellig Cree, which is a partnership with UCC as the third level institute. And that is very much looking at our landscape and how we can create the landscape as a place of learning and education. There has been huge strides made in that. I think those type of partnerships could be very well leveraged in the case of the biosphere. We must also remember, come January, we will have a Munster Technological University in the county. I think that presents huge opportunities for us. So I think that whole area of research and education as a biosphere designation is an area that, as a local authority, we're very interested in developing and working with the partnership. I think it also gives us a really structure, a way of approaching a very more planned and structured way around some of our practices. Niall mentioned fires, upland gorse fires. It has become a huge issue for us in the county over the last number of years. There have been a number of initiatives taken on in relation to that, but I think the engagement through the community and the engagement with landowners can be used also to look to help us all come to terms with operational, the way we're operating in the environment. Also, obviously, issues like grazing and how our approach to invasive plants and that also. I think it's important just to mention the governance structures also that will be in place, and we certainly will look forward to engaging on the Biosphere Management Council and the Advisory Corps, and I think that they are important structures as well, and give a focal point. I suppose in the broader area of biodiversity, I see Kathy Fisher is on tonight there. We have an absolutely excellent biodiversity unit, which is headed up by Kathy Fisher, supported by Senior Planner Damien Ginty, who's on tonight, and Michael Scannell, who's the Director. In part of this being part of his brief. And I suppose, look, we are one of the few authorities that actually have a biodiversity officer, full-time engaged and employed by the local authority. And I think, Kathy will be someone who will add hugely and is doing huge work and will add hugely to developing the biosphere, and working with Eleanor and Trish and the South Kerry Development Partnership and our partners in the NPWS as we progress this and as we develop this. I suppose, look, we have quite an extensive involvement already around biodiversity with the National Biodiversity Action Plan. You know, quite a lot of work is happening already around invasive species in the biosphere area. Biodiversity Week, you know, to see that we've over 300 participants engaged in different activities over the scale year on Biodiversity Week is something that is a credit to the county. And I can see those things again feeding in quite positively into the whole area of the biosphere. And also, you know, looking at things like that biodiversity and climate change training with the community. They're things we do. They're the things we're doing day on day. So I think you know, Niall referring to the whole role of the community and the community engagement in relation to biosphere is something that as a local authority we can greatly bring to the table. It's something we can bring to the table. And also remember, you know, we have a well-structured, very large PPN in the county. And again, that structure will hugely assist and hugely feed into the whole community engagement. And, you know, again, I suppose the work with tidy towns around pollinator plans and all of that, that's all huge, very important work that we're already doing. So, you know, that all helps, and that will all help us as we develop the biosphere and into the future. So, look, I think I more or less have said what I wanted to say. Look, as you know, it's a very special place, the biosphere. I'm not too sure whether I live in the core or just outside it, but it is a very special place. And you know, it's very important that we all work together in partnership. And you know, we have really good relationships here, and we're very fortunate. And Niall, I do want to acknowledge we're really fortunate to have you in the National Parks and Wildlife Service and the staff and your staff. And you know, it has made a lot of things possible that perhaps weren't seen to be possible. And so in that sense, I look forward to developing this and working together. And I've no doubt, you know, it'll be a slow process in time, and it might be frustrating, but look, we've good relationships and we'll stick in there. So so that's it from me for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Moira. It's great to hear about all the work, the background work that the local authority has been doing as well in support of the UNESCO designations, and how you're supporting communities all around the county, really. Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. So our next speaker, I'd like to invite Noel Spillane on. Thank you for joining us, Noel. Noel is CEO of South Kerry Development Partnership, and I'm just about to start sharing the screen now for his presentation, if I can find it. Just one moment. No, sorry, there's a bit of a delay there. I was hitting the wrong button. Thank you for joining us, Noel, and hopefully you're...
Thanks very much, Eleanor, and I'm delighted to be in attendance at the event this evening. And as Moira remarked there, it's great that so many people have tuned in, and I was delighted there just to listen to the previous speakers. So, and well done to yourself on organising the event this evening. And I'd say at the outset, we're absolutely delighted in South Kerry Development Partnership to be working closely with Kerry County Council and the National Parks and Wildlife Service in supporting the Kerry Biosphere Reserve. And of course, you know, we work very closely with Kerry County Council on several different initiatives, and Moira mentioned just one of them there, the Skellacree, and we're delighted, you know, to work closely with them, and very, very good working relationship. So I suppose, look, Eleanor, I'm just going to focus in a little bit for maybe a lot of viewers who are listening in who mightn't be familiar with SKDP, just talk a little bit about SKDP, what type of organisation we are, what we do, and how we're supporting the Kerry Biosphere Reserve. I also want to focus in a little bit on the MacGillycuddy Reeks Mountain Access Forum. That was mentioned there by Niall and also by Moira. And of course, with the expansion of the Biosphere Reserve, we took in the Reeks catchment area in 2017, and that forum has done a lot of work in, I suppose, as Niall put it, in managing the relationship between you know, people and nature in the MacGillycuddy Reeks. And it was rising out of the work at the MacGillycuddy Reeks. I'm just going to go on to touch on the Reeks EIP, European Innovation Partnership Project, and the background to that. And I'm delighted then that Patricia Deane, our Reeks EIP project manager, will speak in more detail on that. So maybe next slide, please, Eleanor. So a little bit about Kerry Development Partnership. We're an integrated local development company, and we work in partnership with statutory agencies, social partners such as trade unions, employers' bodies, and farming organisations, local elected members, and community and voluntary representatives. And we'd be one of 35 such development companies, rural companies nationally. We're an integrated rural development company in that we combine various different funding streams, be the Irish government or EU funded, to try and maximise the impact that we have on the ground for the communities that we serve. Our mission is to promote and assist the development of sustainable, vibrant communities in South Kerry and to improve the quality of life of people living there through the provision of social and economic opportunities. When we talk about sustainable development, we're talking about economic, community, and environment. The environment. There are three key pillars of sustainable development, and you can't have one without the other. Whilst we have a strong economic development role, we also have a very strong social inclusion focus, and that's a very important part of our work. I suppose over the last number of years, we've had an increasing focus and emphasis on environmental and biodiversity projects. Our key objectives are built around three key pillars of activity, and they've been enterprise and employment, education and training, and community development. So all our activities will go across those three key pillars of activity. So next slide, please, Eleanor. So we are area-based. Our geographic footprint, we take in the Biosphere Reserve area. We cover all of the Evra Peninsula, the Kerry sections of the Beara, a little bit of the Dingle Peninsula back as far as Ownescall, southern side of the peninsula, and all of the mid-Kerry area as well. We're a company with limited by guarantee and with charitable status, and we are entirely publicly funded. We're on the go since 1991. We were established under what was known as the PES, the Programme for Economic and Social Progress. And the idea behind the establishment of companies like SKDP was that you could have a community response to the economic and social challenges that rural areas were facing, and that communities would have an opportunity to work with other stakeholders such as the social partners, statutory agencies and local government. We have a voluntary board, and I want to thank the board of the South Kerry Development Partnership for agreeing to support the Kerry Biosphere Reserve and for taking on the responsibilities that they do with all our other different funding streams. So we're fortunate to have such a committed and strong voluntary board of directors. I suppose the structure of our board would very much reflect our partnership ethos, with the four key partners there, like community again, social partners, statutory agencies, and local government represented on our board, with the community and voluntary being the largest pillar, and that's not by accident. We have 40 staff between full and part-time, and a further 250 participants on community work schemes such as the Rural Social Scheme and the TWO scheme. And those schemes provide a very, very important voluntary labour resource to about 200 community projects each year. And a broad range of projects are supported, from care of the elderly to maintenance of waymarked walking ways, to the maintenance of enhancement of community facilities. So a very broad range of projects supported there. We try to be as local as much as possible. We're headquartered in Carsaveen, but we have offices in Killarney, Kinmare and Cloughlin. And in Cloughlin we actually work from the Council's Area Services building. We have office space there from Kerry County Council, and we're very grateful for that. And I suppose with the Reeks EIP project, we've opened an office in the old barracks in Beaufort Village. We had an agreement there with lease with the Community Council. And we were delighted to establish the presence there, that local presence, to give the farmers in the Reeks a local contact point. So next slide, please, Eleanor. Yeah, so how are Kerry partnerships supporting the Kerry Biosphere Reserve? Well, I suppose at the request of Kerry County Council and with the funding support there from the council and the NPWS, which took on the recruitment and employment of the Kerry Biosphere Reserve Officer. And Eleanor, we're delighted that you've come on board. Started with us in the end of August, and you've certainly hit the ground running. I know there were two very well attended community events there online on the management of treatment of rhododendron, and it's great to see those taking place. And you know, there's a number of other events to run throughout this month, and you'll be talking about those later. I'm delighted as well that the Biosphere Reserve Management Council, that's the first meeting of that will take place next week, and that's going to be led obviously by Kerry County Council and National Parks and Wildlife Service with support from South Kerry Development Partnership. And for the broader Kerry UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, this Management Council will be a very, very important governance structure, and you know, will be responsible for the development and implementation of the management policy for the Biosphere Reserve, and ensuring that all goals and objectives are met. So it's great that that's meeting next week. As we've also we support rural communities within the Biosphere Reserve area through your community, economic and environmental projects. And this was just, for example, under the latest round of the Rural Development Leader Programme, which was rolled out in Kerry in, I think, October 2016, it commenced. But with South Kerry Development Partnership, we've allocated over 3.8 million to in excess of 180 projects, you know, again, your community, environmental, economic and social projects. And I know that Kerry has one of the highest allocations for leader funding in the country. And that's very much, I suppose, down to proactive approach of you know, local development companies in Kerry, but very much also down to the partnership approach in working with the Kerry Local Action Group and Kerry County Council. And many of those communities, rural communities, are obviously situated within the Kerry Biosphere Reserve area. In 2014, we established the MacGillycuddy Reeks Mountain Access Forum, a representative management forum to manage, protect and sustainably develop the valuable resource that is the MacGillycuddy Reeks. And I'll talk a little bit more detail about that in my next slide. And of course, through the work of the forum, that was instrumental in the establishment of the Reeks European Innovation Partnership project, and we were delighted to secure almost €1 million there in funding in late 2018 for very, very innovative locally led agri-environment scheme for the Reeks, and Patricia Deane will be going into a bit more detail on that. We've also been working, I suppose, with farmers and landowners to encourage and support the conservation of farmland biodiversity. In like a recent publication that I was going through, it was titled "Farming for Nature: the role of results-based payments." A publication that was supported by, I think, both Chavisk and the NPWS, and it examined, I suppose, the experience of results-based agri-environment schemes in Ireland, including the freshwater pearl mussel scheme that was mentioned earlier on by both Moira and Niall. But you know, in the opening sections of that publication, it was noted that agricultural habitats cover approximately half the European Union, and an estimated 50% of all species and several habitats of conservation concern in the EU depend on agricultural management. So reversing the loss of European biodiversity is clearly dependent on the conservation of farmland biodiversity. So it's so important, when you see stats like that we have our farmers on board and support, encourage and incentivize them to farm for nature, and try and support biodiversity in their farmland management practices. And that's very much what the Reeks EIP project is all about. We've also, I suppose, been heavily involved in the freshwater pearl mussel project. Project focusing obviously on the conservation of the freshwater pearl mussel in the rivers, the river catchments of Cara and Blackwater in the Evra Peninsula. And the partnership, we've played, I suppose, a strong role there in landowner and farmer engagement and encouraging them to sign up and to engage with the project. Recently, through LEADER, we're also going to be undertaking a training project working with 16 farmers in the Kerry National Park Biosphere area. And that training project is going to be focused on rolling out with those landowners the principles of Leave No Trace, the outdoor ethics education program, and also supporting a range of issues regarding biodiversity and land use by recreational users. It's a small project, but again, like potential very much to take it nationally. So next slide, I suppose, please, Eleanor. So just looking at the MacGillycuddy Reeks Mountain Access Forum. So like as was noted earlier on, it was established in 2014, and I think many people will be familiar with the Reeks mountain range. It covers 100 square kilometres, and of course includes Carrantoul, Ireland's highest peak. What I suppose many visitors to the Reeks don't always realise that it is home to many sensitive upland habitats. And what's also, I suppose, sometimes not always well understood is that it is actually private farmland. Many visitors think that it's part of the national park. It isn't. So you have a number of farmers in the Reeks trying to farm it as part of their upland farm holding. It's also one of Ireland's leading outdoor recreational destinations, and we've seen an exponential growth in the numbers of recreational visitors accessing the Reeks. And whilst of course that's very, very positive from the tourism economy, it also creates challenges. Through the work of the forum and through the emplacement of visitor counters at the three principal access points to the Reeks, we've established that in excess of about 120,000 visitors are now accessing the MacGillycuddy Reeks. And that of course creates significant challenges, particularly in with regard to the issue of erosion. And there is significant erosion in a number of the paths in the MacGillycuddy Reek. And that Reeks, and that in turn has a negative knock-on on the sensitive upland habitats. Also, I suppose, look, with the increasing visitor numbers and erosion, that creates challenges for upland farming in the Reeks. I suppose it was those issues and trying to manage those issues that led to the establishment of the MacGillycuddy Reeks Mountain Access Forum in 2014. Next slide, please, Eleanor. So the forum has been very, very busy since its establishment. I suppose it provided first of all, provided a very important, communication forum for all the key stakeholders. So the likes of Kerry County Council, ourselves, National Parks and Wildlife Service, Fault Ireland, Department of Rural and Community Development, representatives from a number of communities within the catchments of the Reeks, and of course a good number of landowners as well. So it provided that forum where issues could be trashed out across the table by all the key stakeholders, and that was an issue that many of the landowners in the Reeks had previously, I suppose, raised, that when they had an issue, who did they go to? So they were able to bring those concerns to the forum. It's also done an awful lot of work around visitor signage, I suppose, in setting out that it is private farmland. And also, I suppose, around the clear prohibition of dogs on the Reeks, and that was a concern, because that was a major concern for many of the landowners. It's done a lot of work on visitor data research. I think there's over 2,000 visitor surveys have been conducted with visitors to the Reeks, ascertaining where they're coming from, what their spend is in the local economy, and I suppose very importantly, what is the level of awareness that is there with regard to the the environmental designations in the Reeks, and that's not always well understood. So again, that's going to be an important piece of work for the forum and indeed for yourself going forward. A very significant piece of work that was done as well was there was a very detailed audit of the PAT network in the Reeks to ascertain the extent of the erosion and the remedial works that would be required to address that. And the forum engaged the services there of the Cairngorms Outdoor Access Trust, National Trust in Scotland, with very significant experience in upland pat restoration projects. Like the assessment gave the forum a very clear understanding of the level of erosion and the extent of it and the work that was going to be required to address that. And one of the key recommendations in that report was the importance of having a locally skilled workforce that could undertake that upland pat repair work. So I suppose those pieces of work spawned a number of applications, funding applications to the Department of Rural and Community Development for landowner training and upland pat repair project. And I think there were 2 projects undertaken at the time through what was known as the RETS initiative, the Rural Economic Development Zones. And a project there, the most recent one, was in for the Spillane section of the Reeks through the Outdoor Recreation Infrastructure Scheme. And again, those applications were done very much in partnership and facilitated by Kerry County Council. And we're very grateful for the support of Kerry County Council in supporting and enabling those projects. The result, I suppose, of those projects is that probably close to about 10 kilometers of the PAT network in the Reeks has been repaired. So significant repair work has been done there. There's more work to do. And we also now have a skilled local workforce. Yeah, there was 8 landowners in the Reeks trained in upland PAT repair techniques. And as a result of the training that they did under the I suppose supervision of the Cairngorms Outdoor Access Trust, those 8 landowners achieved the Scottish Vocational Qualification, received an accredited qualification in environmental conservation as a result of the work that they've done. So I suppose they're just, in terms of the PAT repair work that has been done with the Reeks. I'll just give you an example, I suppose, of before and after. We'll see an area of work, a section of work there was done in the Hags Glen. Maybe just the next slide there, and it'll show the after. So you can see the difference for yourselves. And again, that was all done, using local labour and local materials. So maybe next slide there, Eleanor, please. So that leads on to the locally led agri-environment scheme from the Reeks, and we were delighted to secure that in late 2018. And again, I suppose, by way of background, the Reeks, they are an iconic upland landscape. And I suppose what really is unique about the Reeks in terms of an upland area is just the level of recreational use. And that's probably not experienced in any other upland area in the country. So they are an iconic upland landscape encompassing thousands of hectares of Natura designated landscape. And the mountain range it's held in private farms and commonages. And through the work of the forum, we're well aware that the habitats, soils and landscapes of the conservation value in the Reeks, as well as the farm practices in the Reeks, they're under threat as a result of socioeconomic issues and recreational pressures. In earlier times, the farming workforce in upland areas such as Reeks, they were both younger and more numerous. So within that context, labour-intense tasks such as scrub control, cattle husbandry and vegetation management, those intensive labour tasks often get abandoned, and that has very negative impacts on the landscape. So I suppose it was all those issues then that led to the application to the Department of Agriculture for that locally led agri-environment scheme. And I suppose that leads me on to my final slide, just on what the objectives of the scheme are. They're set out there. So to enable and support landowners to continue upland hill farming through the development of sustainable agricultural management practices. Because if we don't continue to engage with our landowners and support them in upland hill farming, we won't be able to support and protect the biodiversity in our upland areas. The two go hand in hand. To develop in collaboration with the landowners innovative management interventions for the preservation, restoration and enhancement of the upland habitats in farmed high nature value landscape. And also then to create a positive outreach program and to prevent further habitat damage due to increasing recreational pressures on the Reeks through the formation of a landowner ranger system and trail maintenance and definition works. So I suppose for the detail on the Reeks CIP and the work that they're doing, I'm happy to hand over to Patricia, Deane. So again, just delighted to be in attendance this evening, and thank you all for your attention. Thanks, Eleanor.
Thanks very much, Noel. Thank you for that. It was great to see such an overview of so much work that's going on with such a very locally based organization. Is great to see. So thank you for that. So we'll, with no further ado, we'll go on to our final speaker of the evening, Patricia Deane, who is the project manager for the MacGillycuddy Reeks European Innovative Partnerships Project. And she's going to tell us all about the actions on the ground that this project is implementing. Thanks for joining us, Patricia.
Thanks, Eleanor. How are you? So guys, if you were standing in front of me now, I'd probably get you all to stand up and do a few jumping jacks, because you're probably glazed over at this stage now from hearing everything. There's a
long evening.
Long evening. Well, I won't keep you for too long, because I know we have a few questions and answers. I've been trying to answer them there. Has been coming up and everyone's been very good. So like I said, I'll run through this very quickly. So thanks for the opportunity, Eleanor. It's great to have you on board. You've been going 90 miles an hour since you started. So I'll give a quick overview of our MacGillycuddy Reeks Agri-Environmental Project. So I work with South Kerry Development Partnership, for South Kerry Development Partnership, and I'm the project manager, but I'm ably assisted by a part-time project ecologist, Mary Toomey, who's joining us as well tonight. I can see you, Mary, and Mariana Samid, part-time administrator. So we're a small little team, but we're plugging away. So there's our little logo up the top corner, just trying to encompass what we're trying to do, which is basically care for the mountains with the farmers. So it is all about developing innovative actions for high nature value farming in the MacGillycuddy Reeks. And they're all our partners. We're obviously not doing it alone. They are the landowners, of course, playing a very, very proactive part. They have to be involved in these locally led agri-environmental projects, because the projects have to work for the farmers. But we have Crawley Consultants, Kerry County Council, Tralee Institute of Technology, MacGillycuddy Reeks Forum, NPWS, and Tagish are also on board. And obviously we can't leave out the Department of Agriculture, who are our main funders. Okay, so next slide please, Eleanor. So the project is funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine as part of Ireland's Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020. So that's coming to an end shortly. So we'll be looking at the discussions for the next round of CAP. And it was great to hear the Minister earlier being so strong in her commitment to develop and build on the work of the EIPs. That's just really given us all hearts. And I know there's a lot of the other projects that are listening in as well tonight. So shout out to the lads above in the SUS project in Wicklow, the Connemara, locally led agri-environmental, North Connemara, sorry, I'll be corrected, locally led agri-environmental project. The Inish Owen, as far as Ways Donegal, these locally led agri-environmental projects are taking place. And the team obviously who've been very supportive from the Freshwater Pearl Mussel project, and also even the new Wild Atlantic Way Nature project. Derek McLaughlin there has been very supportive of our work as well in MacGillycuddy Reeks every time we go picking their brains. So big shout out there to everybody. But what are we trying to do? Noel has covered a lot of these already. It is really about sustainable agricultural management practices in the MacGillycuddy Reeks, doing it in collaboration with the landowners, and all for the end gain of having preservation and restoration of the upland farm habitats. So that's really what we're trying to do. So you can go to the next slide, please, Eleanor. So yeah, the challenges, there are numerous challenges, but I suppose the best way to show what the challenges are, I suppose, is a photo speaks 1,000 words. So here we have a lovely photograph taken by one of the recreation users, sent in to us, and that really demonstrates the challenging terrain. It's just not like the green field, the lowland grassland. This is challenging landscape to farm in, to work in. And that's the area that we're currently covering there. So you can see the little areas in green. They are the areas that we're working in. So obviously we're working in a very, very small portion because we're a small project. And we have, we'd love to extend to cover all of the area and probably extend beyond that again. We'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation tonight. So next slide, please, Eleanor. So again, I couldn't resist when I was looking at photographs. I had to put in a few diverse photographs. So again, talking to one of the farmers yesterday, and he told me he was gone gathering sheep. And he said, Trish, I'll be gone for most of the day. And I said, Grand, where are you going? He said, well, they're gone down the other side of the mountain. I was there going, there must be an easier way. But unfortunately, there isn't. You know, that's what unenclosed commonages mean. So that is one of the big challenges of farming, trying to get the commonages working and working effectively together. And I'll talk a lot about collaboration and collective working approaches in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So I suppose, guys, what way to demonstrate it more than I suppose show a couple more pictures, and looking at the annual rainfall there now, for example, in the west of Ireland, we can see we do deal with a lot of climate change issues and rainfall, and the increase in rainfall in the last number of years, and probably not going to change for a long time yet. That is challenging. It does present challenges. How to care for the land itself. We, I suppose, expect that everybody should know what the habitats are and how to manage them and best protect them, but with the action, we don't. There is a lot of research that still needs to be carried out. And again, it's working hand in hand with the landowners themselves. It's difficult because, as Noel mentioned, there is really no economic return at the moment from upland sheep farming. And that goes down to a lot of factors, but I suppose the sheep that are suitable to terrain like this wouldn't fetch the best price when they go into production system. And that's just the reality. We're dealing with social isolation as well. So I robbed that image there from the Irish Examiner. A lot of farmers do feel cut off. You know, they're not really feel like that they're involved. So it's one of the challenges. The nature of the work itself, and Noel mentioned it already himself as well, and I know I mentioned it earlier, but simple thing like feeding your sheep. It's not a case of just going outside the door with a bag of ration and putting it on the ground. You know, we're dealing with, again, lots of snow, ice, wind, rain. You get 4 seasons in one day. So lots of challenges, but we're hoping that we'll come up with solutions. Okay. So next slide, please. So I suppose one of the big challenges was trying to raise awareness and trying to, I suppose, tell everybody, well, this land is a special area conservation. What does a special area conservation actually mean? You know, what should a healthy peat land look like? What does a eroding peat land look like? And how do you get a balance in between? So I think that picture demonstrates it quite well. I robbed that from our project ecologist, in case anyone's wondering. Next slide, please. So I suppose, again, the challenges, and there are a lot of projects dealing with some of these. So the Freshwater Pearl Mussel project works adjacent to us. The Kerry Life project was there before them. There is a specific agri-environmental project, the EIP project, dealing with the curlew. I know Moira mentioned the Kerry slug. The Kerry slug lives above in the MacGillycuddy Reeks as well, and is in very good, healthy condition up there, I'm glad to report. We do have to do a little bit more research and looking at things like the red grouse, the ring ousel. These species are in decline, in major decline. So is the curlew, and so is freshwater pearl mussel. And marsh fertility is another example of a species that you'd find in the uplands. The curlew, obviously, people will be saying, oh, she's wrong there now. The curlew does breed actually in some of the wet heaths. That's why I put the curlew in there, just in case anyone picks me up on that. So that just gives people an example of why the uplands need to be managed, why they need to be maintained. So I think that's good. That's their species. They're nearly going extinct, and you can't allow that to happen. Next slide, please. So again, the practical issues in as well on the ground in terms of like the agriculture. We are looking at the encroachment of bracken. Now, obviously, bracken is native to the habitats. It's part of it, but it can encroach and it can take over. And it can shade out a lot of the other naturally occurring vegetation. So that's an issue that needs to be managed. And rhododendron. So I know our colleagues in Connemara are dealing with rhododendron, and our colleagues in Killarney National Park are trying to deal with rhododendron. The difference between the two, I suppose, is that rhododendron is an invasive species. It's not part of the habitats. It's not meant to be there. It does take over absolutely everything. Whereas bracken, you would expect it is native, but it just encroaches. Okay, so that's just a practical issue that we'd be dealing with. So next slide, please, Eleanor. So again, Noel already mentioned this, and that's just another infographic there, I suppose, that shows the level of recreation that's taking place. Issues like dogs being brought onto the mountain. It's privately owned farmland. Dogs chase sheep. and that's a landowner's livelihood at the end of the day. The other issue there, obviously, as Noel mentioned as well, was the extensive trail restoration works, trying to maintain the tracks then after have been carried out a little bit of work. So it's allowing the habitat restore. So it's the same section of track there. So you can see now that over a very short period of time, you have seen a big growth there in the vegetation as people start to walk in the center of the track instead of walking on the sides of it. So it's allowing that vegetation to come back. So next slide, please. So this is something that gets everybody kind of excited and hot under the collar. Can it be done? Can you actually balance agriculture and environment? We're absolutely 100% of the belief that absolutely you can. It's not beyond the realm of possibility at all. You just need to bring a couple of partners together. How do you achieve it? You have to listen to the farmers. They are the land managers. And to support that then, training. So I'll talk a little bit about that. What we do in the agro-environmental project here in the MacGillycuddy Reeks is we develop site-specific annual work plans, because we could see neighbouring colleges, you'd say, well, they're next door, they can't be that different. Absolutely, guys, I would welcome anyone to come down and walk with us and we can demonstrate how different they are. There are different constraints. The results-based payments, this is where we incentivise our farmers to actually improve their habitats for us, and it's all based on that incentivisation and paying for improvements. So it's very clear because it's evidence-based that it is working, that changes can be brought about. Supporting collective work, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it's very hard, like I mentioned already, to manage upland areas if you're trying to do it by yourself. So a big part of our project is trying to train up people and carry out work. So for example, treating rhododendron, quite a labour-intensive piece of work. Any farmer to do that by himself is going to be really challenged and find it hard. So we develop collective groups where a number of farmers can come together and they can work to deal with the issue. And that's working very, very well. Awareness and outreach. That's why we're working so close with the Biosphere. It's to get the word out there. What are the challenges? What are the solutions? And again, I mentioned the other projects up and down the country. We're all trying to support each other. So I would seek advice from all the other projects and we work very well together. That's a huge part of it as well, of the EIP approach. The whole area, like I said, colleges, section of a college, you need to get everybody in to make real change. Ongoing support and motivation. Again, talking to our farmers, being on the doorstep of the farmers, having the ability for the farmers to call in, pick up the phone, give us a ring. You know, they're not getting a different person every time they contact us. We can go out, we can meet them on the ground, you know, so that's a really big part of the locally led agro-environmental projects, that motivation, ongoing support, finding solutions, I suppose, really more than anything, with the farmer, things that will work with the farmer. Exploring new innovations, because it is a European innovation partnership project. So not alone is it about partnership, it's also about innovation. So new ways of doing things. And focusing on high nature value farmland, like a lot of farmers would say, I only have marginal land. But it has, we've seen all the species there and we haven't gone into all the plants that live there because I wouldn't be a botanist and I'm only learning every day myself. But there is so much diversity that we have in these areas, and we need to instill a bit of pride about what we have on the ground. So it is about bringing the partners around the table. It could be NPWS working closely with the Department of Agriculture, for example. We would be looking a long-term commitment really to get real balance, to sustain the farmers to continue doing what they're doing. So next slide, please. So there's a few examples, guys. Not too much text. You'll be warned from all the reading of the text. So there's just one of our training events on the safe use of pesticides, the QQI level 5 handheld knapsack training. And obviously there's one of the guys then, he was out actually doing a bit of work as part of the collective on one of the colleges, trying to treat some of the bracken. Now we're not just treating bracken by spraying it, we're also looking at trampling it and cutting it. So we're looking at a whole range of different measures. So again, to protect our water courses, there's no spraying permitted in your water courses. There's a 5-metre buffer zone. And we would be encouraging the farmers then to cut those areas instead of treating them with spray. But we were wondering why that guy is blue from the waist down. We use marker dye so we can see what's been carried out and you can see where the drift is. So it's all the time trying to balance the agriculture and the environmental. So we have our cattle there. The Dromain Cattle Society have been working very closely with us, and we're working with a lot of the native breeds, trying to reintroduce them, because dual grazing has a place for the management of the upland areas, and that works very successfully this year. So Eleanor's making faces at me here now to move on. And there's Kieran Nugent from the Department of Ag, from the Forestry Service, and Kieran would do a lot of work on controlled burning, because again, that is an issue. And thank God, and I'm going to touch wood as I say this, we've had no uncontrolled burning since we started the project. So that's very, very positive. So next slide, please. So there we are, guys, a couple more pictures about different things we're doing, a little bit more on the path work. There's our farmers, a few of our participant farmers this year. We had online training. We got 100% of our farmers online habitat awareness training. And then in the afternoon, just before the lockdown, we got everybody out to actually show them how we assess the habitats, what are the habitats on their own land. And again, that was the first time that it had been done with the farmers. So there's huge scope for that knowledge transfer, and it needs to be done, that cooperation. There's the RoboCut. It's actually a remote control, guys, believe it or not, that you can bring on, and it manages vegetation. We're in now to the schools, not so much now, obviously, with COVID, but we're doing a lot of work, and Eleanor will be doing a lot of this work as well, engaging with the schools to tell them what we have in the area. And that little graphic over in the corner is a ramp pump. So that's a little device that doesn't need any power whatsoever to pump water. So again, it's protecting the water courses, because obviously, you know, there are so many species living in the water. Like I said, the freshwater pearl mussel, we need to protect that. We don't want our water courses getting damaged. And obviously we need water for livestock. So that supports the temporary grazing and the short-term grazing on the mountain. So next slide, please, Eleanor. So there we are, I talked a bit about that, the collective. So there's a bunch of the guys working, and there's a great social aspect to this collective work as well. So this is where people are trained up, and then a farmer can get them, employ them to come in almost like subcontractors and carry out the work on their land for them. But there's a huge social side. There's great crack, as we'd say in Kerry, it's a great Kerry word, to carrying out this kind of work, but it's also dealing with the environmental issue and the economic benefit. So a big thing of this, a big part of it, the money is staying in the local area and in the local economy. And I suppose when you combine all those things, everyone says, what does sustainability mean? That's sustainability, when you can get that. So we think that there's huge scope to actually expand that approach. So we're nearly coming to the end, Eleanor. Next slide, that's it. So where do we want to go? We do want to expand to cover a larger area. We do think that there is a need to continue to support the farmers, a local team on the ground to keep that motivation going, to troubleshoot the problems, to deal with things like activities requiring consent. There's a long list of things that you cannot do inside an special area conservation. So we would work with the landowners to get those permissions in place and make sure that everything is done right. And you need your local operational group as well, get the support to make sure what you're coming up with is actually doable, you know, and obviously with the farmers themselves. We're taking the learnings, we want to use them, but for a long-term approach. It's well and good to have a 4-year project, but to get real change for biodiversity and for nature, we need a long-term commitment. So why should the projects, I get asked this along, well, why should they be expanded? Well, the projects are delivering, they are evidence-based, we know that from the results-based payments. We have the buy-in engagement of the farmers. We were oversubscribed completely from farmers wanting to join the MacGillycuddy Reeks Agro-Environmental Project. And really importantly as well, which I think is overlooked, we can deliver the targets under the Priority Action Framework. So what are they? Like the Priority Action Framework is all about measures needed to manage Natura 2000 areas. So the upland areas, for example. So what can we do to deliver on the Priority Action Framework? We are doing the site administration, the communication with the farmers. We have the site designation and management planning, site-specific work plans, and the Natura 2000 related communication awareness, the education, the visitor access. We are dealing with those issues. So like my little sheep there's very curiously looking on at us. I would absolutely love anyone, any questions at all, come down after COVID quietens down, whenever restrictions are eased again, do contact us to find out more, and we'd only be delighted to share our learnings. Thank you very much.
Patricia, that's brilliant. Sorry, I feel like I was putting you under terrible pressure to finish up there. I know that we've run over time a little bit, so thank you to everyone who's stayed with us. So Patricia's our final speaker this evening, and every time I hear you speak about the project, it always strikes me how much work is being accomplished with such a small team, which I think is another feather in the cap of these small EIP projects for sure. So I'm just quickly going to run through some of the upcoming events that we have as part of the Our Planet, Your Biosphere program that is funded by Creative Ireland Kerry and the Environmental Protection Agency. So on Saturday, we have a family workshop. It's called A Day in the Woods, but actually it's going to be online. So we'll be joining Alana Nikalig, who's going to do a few activities for us all about the woods, what you can find there, what animals live there, and a little bit about seed saving as well. So you can start to grow your own native woodland. And then next week, we'll be joined by project ecologist from the Reeks EIP project and Patricia's colleague, Mary Toomey, that she mentioned earlier. She's going to run through some of the upland habitats of the Reeks and talk about the habitat assessment program that they use within the project. And then the week after that, we're going to have Mary Sheehan from the NPWS is going to talk about the habitats and species of Killarney National Park. And we've heard a lot about those already today, how significant it is that the park is not just an SAC area, it's an SPA, it's a national park, and it's also the core area of the Kerry UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. So she's going to give us a bit more background to the habitats and species that have led to those designations. And finally, this project is actually running throughout November, so it's launching this evening. You need to go and follow Kerry Biosphere on Facebook or Sean and Shanna Key. He is our artist and storyteller who's working on this project with us. And Storyscapes is an art installation. There's going to be videos and information put up on Facebook, and the idea is that everybody contributes to writing this story. So you've watched the videos and send in your observations, and then Sean will be putting together a story that will be launched on the 21st of November. So you can follow us on Facebook to find out more about that. So